Alright, boys and girls, today's lesson is lesson 4-1. Today we are going to be talking about properties and algebraic notation. So before we get started, let's review a few terms that we've learned throughout the year. The identity property and the commutative property and distributive property. So I'm going to write something on the board here. I'm going to write n plus 3n equals 1 times n plus 3 times n equals 1 plus 3 times n equals, I think I need to shrink this down a little bit because I want to add the rest to it, equals 4 times n equals 4n. Okay, that's really long, but I'm going to explain to you what we're doing here. So the identity property would be right here. Okay, this would be the identity property, because the identity property is basically telling you that this n and this n are pretty much 1. Okay, so n really is 1 times n, and then plus 3 times n. So basically it's 3 times 1 times n, but you don't need to put the 1 times n there when you have the 3, because 3 times 1 is 3. So the identity property will tell you that n plus 3n is really the same as 1n plus 3n. So you all know that 1n plus 3n would eventually equal 4n. So the distributive property kind of jumps in right about here, and it goes all the way over to there. That's a distributive property. Okay, the distributive property basically puts some of your numbers into parentheses to make it a little bit easier to understand. As you can tell here, you have 1 and you have 3, and you have the addition there. So you take the 1 and the 3 and you move them into parentheses, and you multiply them by the n, because n times n would equal n. Okay, so then you get 1 plus 3 times n. Well, you all know that 1 plus 3 is 4. Times it by n gives your answer 4n, because that n is actually 1n. You just don't write the 1 in there. So 1 times 4 equals 4 to give you a 4n. This is just a long drawn out picture of what you should sort of be understanding here, and it's going to have stuff to do with our lesson today. So the next thing is the commutative property. Is basically when something is written on one side, 43 times 29, it would equal the same on the other side, but just written differently. So if you have 4 times 3, it would equal 3 times 4, because they both equal the same. It just looks different on the other side. So I'm going to shoot all this stuff out of the way because I want to get going with today's lesson. So turn to page 127 in your activity book. At the top, it's going to talk about an expression. So an expression is one or more numbers, variables, or numbers and variables with one or more operations. So example would be 4, 6x, 6x minus 5, and 7 plus 4. So this is just an expression. This is one or more numbers, variables, or numbers and variables with one or more operations. Next one, an equation, is a statement that two expressions are equal. It has an equal sign. Alright, so that just shows you that whatever's on one side is equal to the other side. So we know, if you zoom in closer, 40 plus 25 is 65, and that's what it says on the other side here. 16 divided by 4 equals 4. If you minus 3, you get 1, so it's equal to 1. So that's an equation. Alright, my picture's really blurry. Alright, so we're going to talk about simplifying an expression or equation. Simplifying an expression or an equation by performing operations to combine like terms. So with number 1, I told you earlier that when a when a letter is written by itself, we call it a variable. So when the variable is written by itself, it's really 1n. Okay, because that n is 1n. They just don't put 1n. So you know 1n plus 5n should equal 6n. Same with number 2. 17t plus basically 1t would equal 18t. Okay, next one is 1x plus 245x would equal 246x. So go ahead and answer the next 3 together, or on your own, and then unpause it and work on it, and I'll show you the answers. Okay, so 9e minus 1e would equal 80. 8e, get it, 80. 8c plus 1c plus 1c would equal 10c. And the last one is 5z minus z minus z. So 5z minus a z would equal 4z, minus another z would equal 3z. Alright, so next thing is just ways to solve, just different equations to solve. And there's a rule. The rule is you always do what's inside the parentheses first. So take 35 divided by 7, it gives you 5. So you get 30 divided by 5, that'll give you 6. Next one, 72 divided by 9 equals 8. 8 divided by 4 equals 2. Okay, so actually right now, why don't you go ahead and do 9 through 12 on your own, and then pause it, and I'll go over them with you. Alright, so 32 divided by 8 equals 4. 80 divided by 4 equals 20. Hopefully you got 8 here. 13 minus 8 is 5. This one right here, 600 minus 400 equals 200. Minus 10 equals 190. And then you get 26 minus 6, which equals 20. 100 minus 20 equals 80. Okay, all that, I think that's all easy stuff. Now here we need to find the property use the properties to find the value of the square or a. So this time we're trying to figure out what the square or the variable represents. So in the first one, we have 49 plus 17. Well, this is because you know the commutative property. You know that whatever's over here can be flipped around to be the same on the other side. So you know that's a 17 in there. So the square equals 17. Now you know that from your commutative property. Another one here, this is also the commutative property here, because we know we have something times 2 times 3. Here we have 3 times 2, and the other digit we're missing is a 4. So if you plug a 4 in there, a would equal 4. Let's see if it works out. 4 times 2 is 8. Times 3 is 24, so we get 24 on this side. And over here we have, do what's in the parentheses first, so we have 6 times 4 would equal 24. So a is 4. Next one, here's pretty easy. We have 6 times 8 here, and we have something times 6 here. Well, that square has to be 8 because of the commutative property. Here's another one. This is the distributive property because it takes 6 multiplied by each of these two numbers inside the parentheses. So 6 multiplied by 40 for the first one, and then 6 multiplied by 5 for the second one. So that tells you that is supposed to be a 5. Same one here. We're actually missing 2 squares, but if you go over to the other side, it'll show you what it looked like before the distributive property, because in the distributive property you would take the 7 multiplied by the 5 and the 7 multiplied by the 9. Here, something multiplied by 5, and here, something multiplied by 9, so your square would be 7. Alright, so after the lesson I want you to work on 18 through 20 on your own, but right now I want to shrink this page down, and I want you to turn to the next page. And I think this is all practice on the next page, and it is. So what I want you to do is I want you to figure out what we're missing here, okay? And this is a little bit tougher because this first one says 9 times n equals 144. So 9 multiplied by something to get 144. So I like to work on my fact triangles here. I know 9 times something got me 144. So there's a trick. You could take 144 divided by 9 to get that answer. So take 144 divided by 9. And if we do that, we get 1 time there, 9, 54. And we get 6 there. 54 is 0, so the answer is 16. So we know n equals 16. So some you really have to work out. The next one, we have something was added 170 to get 200. Well, if you're trying to figure out what that s is, you need to know what you added to 170. Well, you could always take the 170 and just subtract it from the 200, and you get an answer of 30. Go back up, put that 30 at the top, and see if 170 plus 30 gets you 200, and it does. The answer is 30. So, so as you go through and work on these other problems, remember to do what's in the parentheses first, and then do the operations next. Whatever's next for you to work on. So it gets harder, it gets trickier. I'm not totally sure that it's hard. I just think it takes a while and it's confusing sometimes. But as long as you plug in the numbers in the right location, you'll be fine. Down here in the bottom, at number 34 through 42, it tells you what it is. So A is 4, so you put 4 on A, so you get 4 plus 6 is 10, and then you take 19 minus 10, which is 9. Here tells you A is 10, so put 10 instead of A there. 80 minus 10, or divided by 10 is 8, and then you do the next part of the problem, and you get 8 minus 5 equals 3. So I want you to work on all these inside, actually in your independent station, because you're not going to have time in this one.